Okay, let's start on the next task one, which is the graphs without a time period. Okay, because a graph that has no time period, you will not talk about describing changes over time, because there's no time. It's only 1 year. So everything you talk about, all the phrases that I've given you here, fluctuation, there was a period of stability, increase, decrease, etc., you're not going to use it in this graph because there's basically no time period. There's just 1 year, so you can't use those. Okay, so that's the reason why we talk about this differently. That's the reason why we separate this into a different category, and we have different phrases, and we approach it differently. That's why it's in the second category. Okay, so just take note, even though it may look the same, the difference is that there is no time period. It's only 1 year. Okay, so an example would be this. There's only 1 year, 2010. All this, this looks like a it looks like it's talking about time, but you have to look carefully what this is. This is different products in a bakery. Okay, it's not about the years here. Okay, so how do we approach this? Firstly, you're going to compare within each category. All right, so when we have something like this, let's make it smaller. Okay, you're going to compare within each category. That means it could be the first versus the last category within a subject. For example, here you have Lovely Loaves and Bernie's Buns. You have different products. You have the number of items sold. So you have different categories like cakes, cookies, etc. You're going to compare. You're going to think about the first and the last. Okay, so within the category of, say, Bernie's Buns, you're talking about the first and the last. All right, and you're going to compare across the subjects. So you sometimes you may want to you're not just going to compare the category, the cakes, cookies, etc. within Bernie's Buns or within Lovely Loaves, but you're going to compare the products in Lovely Loaves versus the products in Bernie's Buns. Okay, so for example, here it says the first category versus the last category within what subject. Example, donuts were the most popular product sold by Lovely Loaves, and toasted sandwiches were the least. So it's talking about Lovely Loaves. Within it, what which is the first, which is the last. Or you could compare across subjects, which means you're comparing products in Lovely Loaves versus products in Bernie's Buns. For example, Lovely Loaves sold more than 3 times as many salads as Bernie's Buns. Okay, 3 times as many salads as Bernie's Buns. So you're comparing across. All right. So okay, this is pretty much what you have to do, because you remember. Just imagine you just have you don't have the changes over time. You just have the comparison. All right. You just want to talk about compare within each subject. Okay. So let's do this introduction. Again, you just paraphrase. The chart gives figures for the sales of blah, blah, blah. You just paraphrase that. Overall, it can be seen that donuts were the most popular item in both bakeries. Okay, so what are you doing? You're doing number 1. Okay, that's an overview. Again, remember, as I say, what you do in an overview, it is a big picture. Imagine you have just 1 or 2 sentences to tell your friend who cannot see this what is the most important thing that kind of like summarizes everything, well, to the best of its ability to summarize the whole chart or the whole graph. You could say the first. Okay, so donuts were number 1 among in both Lovely Loaves and Bernie's Buns. Okay, then you go to body 1, body 2. Again, you have a choice how you're going to divide. You have to make a decision how you're going to divide body 1 and body 2. What you could do is, here, body 1, I focus on Bernie's Buns. Body 2, I focus on Lovely Loaves. Okay, so I go Bernie's Buns. For the Bernie's Buns, nearly 140 donuts were sold every Saturday. The figure was, Bernie's Buns, blue color. The figure was about 7 times more than the number of salads sold. Okay, why do I compare it with the salads? Because the salads is the least. Okay, the second and third best-selling item was cookies and cakes. At around 118 and 102 items sold respectively. Rose and Chris both sold equally well at above 70 items. Okay, now what I want you to take note of is here. Did I talk about every single category, every single product there? No, you don't have to. Okay, remember, you make a decision, you don't have to. But I talked about the first, I talked about the last, I compared how many times, I talked about the second and third, and I mentioned at 118 and 102 respectively, and I talked about similar, sold equally well. You see, all these are comparative, equally well, sold equally well. All these are comparative terms at above 70 items. Okay, and then, so I talk about first, I talk about last, I talk about similar, and I could talk about differences. Okay, going to the second paragraph, go to Lovely Loaves. Lovely Loaves sold nearly 10 fewer donuts than Bernie's Buns. Okay, so now I'm comparing also across. So yeah, this is number one, but do you see that Lovely Loaves sold about 10, nearly 10, or it could be probably slightly more than 10. Okay, I would say nearly 20 probably, right? Nearly 20 fewer donuts than Bernie's Buns at around 120. Okay, so I'm comparing across. All right, it's lowest, then I compare within, because when you say it's lowest, it's really, you're saying that you're comparing within the subject being Lovely Loaves. Its lowest selling item was toasted sandwiches. Okay, 22. All right. While Bernie's Buns, now I compare across again. While Bernie's Buns sold more of most of the items as compared to Lovely Loaves, because if you look at all this, Bernie's Buns sold more of almost all items. Lovely Loaves sold slightly more fresh loaves. You see when I talk about taking note of the significant or the main features, here's a main feature in everything, and I'm pointing it out. In everything, almost everything, you know, Bernie's Buns sold more than Lovely Loaves, but except for Lovely Loaves sold slightly more fresh loaves. Okay, 50 to 40. Furthermore, in addition, another thing in which Lovely Loaves sold more than Bernie's Buns. Bernie's Buns is, furthermore, Lovely Loaves sold more than 3 times the number of salads as compared to Bernie's Buns at around 62 and 18 respect. So this is huge. This is huge. Okay, everything else, Bernie's Buns sold more than Lovely Loaves, but here, except for this and this, which except for this fresh loaves and this, and salads is very important. Why? Not only did Lovely Loaves sell more salads than Bernie's Buns, but it was more than 3 times more. Okay, that's huge. Okay, get on your, I mentioned to you, think about the significant and points, the main features. Think about yourself maybe as an investor, or whatever it may be, and the first thing you whatever you don't talk about are things that strike you first. The last, the similar, the difference, and this difference is important. The fact that it's 3 times. Not only is it 3 times, but it goes against everything, you know, that everything else represents, which kind of like tells you that Bernie's Buns sells or sold more items than Lovely Loaves for the similar item. But here it is not just that Lovely Loaves sold more salads than Bernie's Buns, but 3 times more. That's huge. That's something that you have to talk about. And same for this, because this is the other odd one out, in terms of the fact that Lovely Loaves sold more fresh loaves than Bernie's Buns, even though it's only just a bit more, 10 more, but this is still an odd one out. So significant. It's significant. Okay, so here you can see we are talking about comparing within, comparing across. We think about the first, the last, similar, and difference. Okay, so that's a huge difference here. Okay, we talked about the first, we talked about the last. Okay, we talked about the last salads. This was the last. Okay, then we talked about lowest selling item, the last. Okay, then we compared across also. Okay, so this is everything's about comparison here for the second kind of graph. No changes over time anymore. No phrases that a lot of the phrases that we learned in the first task 1 can't be used here. So it's all about comparing. Okay, It's all about comparing like that. Do it your own way. Everybody's going to do it differently. You know, there are many ways of dividing your body 1 and body 2. There are many ways of talking about the overview. Like just now, what I talked about the overview, you know, what I wrote for the overview is that donuts were the most popular items, but another person could write, again, this is not wrong because the examiner, there's no right or wrong, okay, as long as you're following the principles. So another student could write that Bernie's buns sold more items than Lovely Loaves. Yeah, in general, if you add out all this, isn't it true that Bernie's buns sold more items than Lovely Loaves? Yeah, even though this was much higher here, but if you add out all together, generally you're seeing that Bernie's buns sold more items than Lovely Loaves, correct? So there are different ways of approaching the overview, different ways of approaching the body, okay? Think about the principles, okay, of comparison, all right?